Hello everyone, my name is Akal and I am a somatic therapist, an astrological counselor, and I do a lot of work with men, etc., etc. If you'd like to find out a little bit more about what I do, because I've been so persuasive here, you can check out my website, which I have posted down below the video. So, what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about Hasta Nakshatra as it relates to the various planetary energies and how those planetary energies sort of intertwine. So how we look at this is there are four divisions within Hasta Nakshatra. Well, there's four divisions within every Nakshatra. These divisions essentially, in some ways, I guess they illustrate the life path. They illustrate how these people, these individuals transform and how they change. Sometimes, like for instance, if there's a lot of Jupiter or a lot of Saturn in the padas, then what ends up happening is that the transformation tends to happen through major life experiences, major life events. Sometimes they can happen kind of in the background where it's sort of not obvious. And it may happen over a broader course of period of time, much longer course of period of time. So in this particular case with Hasta, though, we have very fast-moving planets. We have the padas. First pada is Mars, second one Venus, third Mercury, and the fourth is ruled by the moon. And again, these are all fast-moving planets. So the implication here is that these individuals, their life path tends to transform in very fast-moving kind of ways. Now, this isn't always true, of course. A lot of times, before I go into that sort of thing, let me go ahead and tell you some real quickly. All the nakshatras have sort of like what I would consider like the lower mind or the higher mind, or the lower state of being and the higher state of being. I'm not implying that one is better than the other, but one brings you closer to spirit. One takes you closer to God, the universe, infinity, whatever you want to call it. So in this particular case, the lower expression of Hasta Nakshatra, one of the terms I saw thrown around was poverty. Another one I saw was hustle. So, and again, the ability to work with objects. There's a lot of this like referencing to the hands and one's ability to make things and to do things with one's hands. So, which also would imply healing, the capacity to do healing work. So energy work on people and that sort of thing. So the other interesting thing is that I saw was the higher expression of Hasta Nakshatra, other than, let's say, doing healing work or working with one's hands, massage, that kind of deal, would be public service. It is about service. So, and this makes sense because Hasta Nakshatra falls within Virgo, and Virgo very service oriented in that sort of material plane kind of way. So, looking again at the energies here that are all kind of intertwining and creating what it is that Hasta Nakshatra is all about, we have to look at first is the fact that it is indeed in Virgo. Mercury, as it's expressed, so Mercury rules Virgo, and as it's expressed in Virgo, it's an externalized energy. It's a Mercury or a rational mind that is fixed on material things. So it's seeing material things like this and that, back and forth, back and forth. And so a lot of times I think one of the generalizations people make about Virgo is that the tendency to be kind of perfectionist. And I could see that with Hasta Nakshatra being, I guess, this is an exemplary position for this kind of energy possibly to express. So the other planet that's really a prominent planet for Hasta Nakshatra is the moon. Now, why the moon? We got to look at the gunas in order to understand why the moon. Why does the moon rule Hasta? It has to do with the gunas. So now what do I mean by that? So on the basic primary level here, which this literally refers to the second third of the zodiac. So the first third of the zodiac functions rajasically. The second third of the zodiac is tamasic. The third third is sattvic. So now what does that mean? So Rajasic, Tamasic, Sattvic are the fundamental energies that underlie all existence. All things in creation have dominances of these three things. And so what is tamasic? Tamasic is density. A lot of times you can think about it as being the mind. So the mind is, it's etheric in nature, but it's always kind of driving you towards density. It's always you're always kind of like looking out, and this is not always true, of course. This would be like the function of the lower mind, or the personality that I'm talking about here. It's getting you to fixate on physical things and thinking that we have to augment the physical things in order to transform truly, which isn't necessarily true. We learn to shine from the inside out. That is part of our spiritual paths. Every one of us is learning to shine from the inside out, as opposed to augmenting our environment and augmenting those around us. Because we all know we try to change our environments and those around us. It doesn't always work, does it? So that is tamasic. It is about density. And you can see with Hasta, on its basic level, it is tamasic. On the secondary level, which would be kind of like the negative mind, and I'm not saying that these people are negative people. I'm simply saying that the negative mind functions as protection. So it's fast mind and it's protective. It's instinctual. So now, again, if you see Rajasic energy, which is how this energy is expressed or projected out into the physical world, out into the material world, these individuals are basically expressing activity out into the material world. And that's what Rajasic means. It means it has an object, you go towards that object. It's activity towards an object. And that also corresponds, again, with the first third of the zodiac. So we don't have Sattvic here, but Sattvic, if you do see with some of the other nakshatras, that some of the other videos I've done, you'll see Sattvic energy. And that is basically neutral. It's the neutral mind, but it also represents a flow through, how energy simply flows through and it's clear. So it's clarity, clear. So what we got here is we got Rajasic energy, or tamasic energy and Rajasic energy. Now those two energies, when combined, so it's something that's very solid and material that creates movement. So what is that? That's the moon. Why do I say that? So think about the effect of the moon on the tides. Think about the effect of the moon on human emotion. So let's look at emotion here, because emotion is going to play in a lot with this particular nakshatra. I'm not saying that these are emotional people, but the emotion does play in here. So what we have here is we have to reframe emotion and look at it as energy in motion. So what is the moon? The moon is something that guides this energy in motion. And what ends up happening is when we are emotional, that means that the I, the ego, the personality is identified with that movement of energy. So again, on the lower level, Hasta Nakshatra, if they're not cultivating, they've got Mercury and the moon going on here. So the moon is usually related also with karma. It's related to past. It's related to, the mother and home, and again, it's where we get our emotional needs filled. So, but again, the key here is past. So we got Mercury, which is the rational mind, and you've got emotion. How do these interplay? So what the Mercury is doing here is the Mercury is looking at emotion. So we've got this back and forth aspect of Mercury, but again, this is Mercury externalized because again, it's under Virgo. So one's emotions, if you're a Hasta Nakshatra native, one's emotions may end up dictating what it is that you end up intellectually or rationally focusing on. Now, what is rational mind? Rational mind is taking various things and structuring it and creating a cohesive sequence. So that becomes difficult with emotions. So this is one of the reasons why the lower expression of Hasta Nakshatra is sometimes associated with poverty. It's not, if you're constantly pursuing or you're constantly identified with this rational mind that is constantly shifting back and forth between this and that, and it's trying to grasp for something solid, and then all it's getting is emotion, which is always changing as well. It's not helpful, right? It's difficult. So now as these individuals start to meditate, something happens. This transformation process can then start to occur. The lower aspect can then, well, let's put it this way. The ego or the personality can then move towards merger with the soul. And it's when you get this merger with the soul, you cease to allow the moon to dictate how your energy is flowing. So, and this can happen over the progression of one's life, of course, over longer terms, or this can happen quite quickly. And these individuals, again, because we have fast-moving planets, this transformation process, once one commits to it, can happen quite fast. So, first pada. So we got Mercury, Moon, and now we add Mars to it. So Mars is instinctual drive. It's fast-moving energy. And again, the singular word I put down there was just energy or energetic. So this adds a little more oomph or a little more drive to towards what these people are choosing to do. So second pada, Venus. I put perfected form. Why perfected form? I like the look of Venus. Venus is one of those things that draws you into the body in a lot of ways. It draws you into the body, and this could be good or bad. It's good if it draws you into the body and you have some degree of objectivity. It could be potentially bad if it draws you into the body and you're overly fixated on pleasure seeking, let's say. But one way you can look at Venus is think about the conduit to the senses. It kind of governs in a lot of ways what you desire and what dictates what we desire. A lot of times it's our sensory experience. It's what we see, smell, want to taste, etc. So the possibility here with Venus mixing with the moon and mixing with Mercury here is the possibility of perfected form. And that how do I explain this? So that basically would mean that once you gain objectivity, you can see how your emotions are shifting you around. And if you can see how your emotions are shifting you around, you can gain discernment, which is one of those gifts of Mercury, is the ability to discern and to use the rational mind. However, if you can transcend the rational mind, then you can go into intuition. If you can go into intuition, you can go into feeling. And then, if you can be guided by your deeper sense of feeling, you can also transcend the sort of base level of Venus, which is that sort of impulse to go into those things which we desire. But in this particular case, if Venus becomes a little more exalted in its behavior, then what it ends up is we end up desiring doing those things which are uplifting. So we have the possibility of whatever we consider however we're externalizing our energy, we can perfect that. We can perfect whatever it is that we are externalizing our energy. Again, the assumption here is that this individual is not identified with their emotion. They're not identified with the movement of the rational mind, the movement back and forth. Again, because think about it, how much of life is linear? So that's one of the lessons with a lot of people who have a strong Mercury or have a lot of Mercury in their nakshatras, is to learn that life isn't necessarily linear. Life is abstract in a lot of ways. In fact, there's much more about life that we cannot explain than what we can. So anyway, that's pada 2. You're going to have an abundance of this addition of desire and what it is that you're desiring to perfect. Third pada is Mercury. I wrote intelligence. This is a bit like adding a little bit of Gemini to the mix. Again, discerning. That's all I really can say about this. I mean, again, if you add a little more Mercury to what's already currently going on, it allows one again to shift back and forth and to perceive things. But again, everything with this particular nakshatra goes back to can this individual remove their identification with their mind? Can they be objective with their emotions and their mind? This is a moksha path. Moksha means liberation. So this path is meant to move towards spirit. Whether they do that or not is a different question, but that's what it's meant to do. Finally, pot of 4, which my shoulder is obstructing. I wrote tribe. Why did I write tribe? I could have written community. I could have wrote any of a sort of group social dynamics. But tribe seemed to make more sense to me just because the moon, again, associated with the past. I like to think of the moon as, emotional karma, however you want to perceive it. But the idea here is that there's an emotional need. And a lot of times we satisfy our emotional needs, again, through home. We satisfy our emotional needs through connection with people. We satisfy our emotional needs, I guess eating sometimes, but the point here is that in this particular case, I want to focus on this idea that there is a social aspect. So the moon in this particular case would show you, if you have pot of 4, there's going to be an emphasis on wanting to connect with community, wanting to connect with your like tribe, those that you can feel comforted around. And we all, for better or worse, we all feel much more comfortable in our own bubbles. And that's another reason I use the word tribe. Tribe to me always implies that you exist in a bubble, again, for better or worse. So with all that said, hopefully you got a better idea, at very least, how these energies intertwine. I'm not particularly great at remembering attributes. So for me, looking at planetary energies and seeing how they, like I said, how they kind of dance together is, this is how I get a feel for how these nakshatras function. So with all that said, appreciate you watching the video. Thank you.